He stabbed a man 9 times in the face with a pen during a prison visit and brutally murdered Australia's most infamous gangland killer with the metal pipe of an exercise bike behind prison walls. This is the story of Matthew Charles Johnson, who turned Australia's most secure prison into his personal killing ground.
Warning: viewers' discretion is advised.
Born on August 9, 1973, Matthew Charles Johnson grew up in Melbourne's working-class western suburbs, where trouble found him early. Court records show his first documented police contact came at just 15 years old, when officers arrested him for breaking into a local shop. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the first visible sign of a pattern. By 16, Johnson had dropped out of school entirely. Former classmates later told reporters he was quick to anger and frequently involved in schoolyard fights. One teacher, who requested anonymity in a 2010 newspaper interview, recalled, "He wasn't the kind of kid who would back down. Ever." At 17, Johnson graduated from petty theft to armed robbery. Police reports detail how he threatened a convenience store clerk with a knife, demanding cash and cigarettes. This escalation earned him his first adult prison sentence, 12 months at Port Phillip Prison. Prison didn't rehabilitate Johnson. It transformed him. Former inmates who served time with him described a young man who quickly understood the power dynamics. He learned that respect came through fear, one former prisoner told investigators. By his early 20s, Johnson had accumulated a disturbing record: 3 armed robbery convictions, 7 assault charges, and 2 convictions for weapon possession. Each prison term lasted longer than the last. It was during a 1996 stint at Barwon Prison that Johnson first demonstrated the brutality that would become his trademark. According to court documents, Johnson attacked another inmate in the exercise yard, beating him unconscious while guards struggled to intervene. The victim required hospitalization for a fractured skull and orbital bone. Most chilling was a 1999 incident documented in Victorian prison records. Johnson stabbed a visiting associate 9 times in the face with a pen when the man refused to smuggle contraband. This attack, carried out despite the presence of guards and security cameras, established Johnson as someone who followed no rules but his own. By 2001, prison officials had classified Johnson as a maximum security prisoner, requiring special handling protocols. Internal corrections documents noted his capacity for sudden, extreme violence and complete disregard for consequences. Court documents reveal Johnson formed the Prisoners of War gang, known as POW, recruiting inmates who shared his hatred for informants and sex offenders. The gang's formation wasn't random. It filled a power vacuum after authorities cracked down on other prison gangs. Johnson enforced strict rules within POW. Members displayed their allegiance through a distinct hand gesture, fingers forming a P while the other hand formed an O and W. Prison intelligence units documented this symbol appearing in photographs, letters, and even tattoos among members. Johnson's leadership method became clear through incident reports. In 2004, security cameras at Barwon Prison captured Johnson approaching a newly arrived prisoner in the exercise yard. After a brief conversation, Johnson struck the man with a weight plate, fracturing his jaw. Investigation revealed the victim had testified against former associates. The message was unmistakable: informants would face consequences. At Port Phillip Prison in 2005, Johnson orchestrated an attack on Raymond Merritt, a convicted child offender. 3 POW members cornered Merritt in the shower block while Johnson stood watch. Guards found Merritt with severe facial fractures and broken ribs. No witnesses came forward, demonstrating Johnson's control over information within prison walls. Johnson maintained strict hierarchies within POW. Former member Trevor Johnson later testified that Matthew required all contraband, drugs, weapons, phones, to flow through approved channels, with a percentage designated for the gang's war chest. This fund paid for legal representation and supported members' families on the outside. Victorian corrections records showed Johnson's influence expanded beyond his immediate location. When transferred between facilities, POW members already incarcerated would prepare for his arrival. At Fulham Correctional Center in 2006, Johnson arrived to find the gang had already established control over specific prison jobs and territory. Prison intelligence reports documented Johnson's sophisticated communication network. Guards discovered coded messages and seemingly innocent letters to visitors. These communications coordinated drug deliveries, identified potential recruits, and sometimes marked targets for violence. The most revealing aspect of Johnson's power was his ability to isolate targets. Prison CCTV footage from Bar 1 in 2007 showed inmates systematically clearing an area before Johnson confronted a suspected informant. 23 minutes passed before guards intervened. By then, the victim had sustained multiple fractures and internal bleeding. Johnson's control extended to prison staff. A 2008 internal investigation uncovered evidence that 2 corrections officers provided Johnson with information about new arrivals' criminal histories. Both officers were dismissed, but the incident revealed how deeply Johnson's influence penetrated the system. Corrections Victoria attempted to limit Johnson's power by frequently relocating him between prisons. Records show he spent time in Barwon, Port Phillip, Melbourne Assessment Prison, and Marngoneet Correctional Center within a 2-year period. Yet each transfer only expanded his network as he recruited new members and established connections. When authorities placed Johnson in segregation, he adapted. In 2009, prison officials discovered he had developed a communication system using drains between cells. Guards found handwritten notes with instructions for attacks on specific inmates scheduled for release into general population. Psychological assessments conducted during this period described Johnson as displaying calculated rather than impulsive aggression, and noted his exceptional ability to manipulate prison environments to his advantage. Unlike many violent offenders, Johnson rarely broke rules impulsively. His violations were strategic. Court testimonies revealed Johnson held an unofficial position as chief enforcer of the prisoner's code, a set of rules placing informants and sex offenders at the bottom of the hierarchy and marking them as legitimate targets. In this volatile environment, Carl Williams arrived in 2008. Williams was no ordinary criminal. Once a central figure in Melbourne's bloody Gangland wars, he had been involved in at least 11 murders, earning him the media nickname the Baby-Faced Killer. His criminal career had generated millions in drug profits before his 2007 conviction. Williams' initial housing in Barwon's Acacia unit created immediate tension. Unlike Johnson, who embraced the harsh realities of prison life, Williams sought special privileges. Prison records show he received a private television, extra phone calls, and even a personal sandwich press. Accommodations granted in exchange for his cooperation with authorities. This cooperation crossed the prison's most dangerous line. In late 2009, Williams began providing information to Victoria Police about unsolved murders, including the killing of police informant Terrence Hodson and his wife Christine. These discussions specifically implicated former police officer Paul Dale. News of Williams' cooperation reached Johnson through Barwon's efficient inmate intelligence network. A former prisoner later testified that Williams was openly discussing his police interviews, showing a remarkable lack of concern for the prison's cardinal rule against informing. The Victorian Office of Corrections made a critical decision in early 2010. Despite Johnson's history and Williams' vulnerable status as an informant, officials housed them in the same unit, separated by just a few cells. Prison documents justified this arrangement based on staff shortages and space limitations. Williams seemed oblivious to the danger. CCTV footage from April 2010 showed him regularly socializing with Johnson in common areas, even sharing meals. While Williams appeared relaxed, other inmates noticed Johnson's unusual attentiveness to Williams' movements and routines. On April 18, 2010, the day before Williams' death, security cameras captured a telling scene. Johnson stood observing Williams for nearly 4 minutes as Williams made a phone call. When Williams finished, Johnson approached him briefly before walking away. A prison officer later described Williams as appearing unusually subdued following this interaction. That same evening, 3 inmates were seen entering Johnson's cell for a meeting lasting approximately 20 minutes. The group dispersed before lockdown, with Johnson nodding to each man separately as they departed. Before his life ended on the floor of Barwon Prison, Carl Williams had transformed himself from a small-time drug dealer into one of Australia's most notorious criminals. Williams' criminal career began in Melbourne's western suburbs during the 1990s, selling amphetamines from the trunk of his car. Court records show his first conviction came at age 24 for minor drug offenses. Unlike many criminals who maintain low profiles, Williams actively sought notoriety. By 2000, he had established connections with established crime families and began wholesale drug trafficking. The Melbourne Gangland Wars erupted in 1998 and would claim 36 lives over the next decade. Williams emerged as a central figure in this violent conflict. Police intelligence reports identified Williams as responsible for ordering at least 11 murders between 2000 and 2005. His victims included Jason Moran, Lewis Moran, and Mark Malia, all rivals in Melbourne's criminal underworld. Williams' criminal empire collapsed in 2004 when police arrested him for drug trafficking and multiple murders. In 2007, he received a life sentence with a non-parole period of 35 years. Supreme Court Justice Betty King described Williams as a killer who has no respect for human life during sentencing. Once incarcerated, Williams made a strategic decision that would ultimately seal his fate. Beginning in late 2008, official prison visitor logs show regular meetings between Williams and detectives from Victoria Police's Petra Task Force, which investigated police corruption and unsolved murders. Williams provided critical information about the 2004 murders of police informant Terrence Hodson and his wife Christine. His statements directly implicated former drug squad detective Paul Dale and hitman Rodney Collins. Court documents reveal Williams signed a formal police statement on April 13, 2010, just 6 days before his death. April 19, 2010, began as a routine day in Barwon Prison's Acacia unit. Security footage obtained by police shows Williams waking at approximately 7 a.m. Breakfast service occurred at 8:15 a.m. Williams spent the morning watching television in the common area, where cameras captured him having a seemingly amicable conversation with Johnson at 11:22 a.m. At 12:48 p.m., correctional officers opened cells for the lunch period. Williams entered the common area and sat at a metal table with his back to the corridor. CCTV footage shows Johnson entering his own cell at 12:52 p.m. 1 minute later, Johnson emerged carrying what investigators later identified as a metal pole removed from an exercise bike. At 12:54 p.m., Johnson approached Williams from behind. Williams, looking at a newspaper, remained unaware of Johnson's approach. Johnson raised the metal pole high above his head and brought it down with full force onto Williams' skull. The coroner's report detailed that the first blow fractured Williams' skull and likely rendered him unconscious immediately. Nevertheless, Johnson continued his attack. The security footage shows Johnson delivering 7 more blows to Williams' head. After the 8th strike, Johnson placed his foot on Williams' head and applied pressure while delivering a final blow. The entire attack lasted 31 seconds. Williams never had an opportunity to defend himself. Most disturbing was what happened next. Johnson calmly returned to his cell, placed the murder weapon on his bed, washed his hands, and changed his shirt. He then returned to the common area, stepped over Williams' motionless body, and pressed an intercom button to summon guards. When a staff member responded, Johnson stated, "I think Fatty's had a heart attack." He then returned to his cell and waited. The prison's response revealed catastrophic security failures. Despite the murder occurring directly in front of a security camera, no guards were monitoring the footage in real time. Records from the subsequent investigation confirmed that 27 minutes passed between Williams' murder and the first staff member arriving at the scene. His death effectively terminated the prosecution of Paul Dale for the Hodson murders, as Williams' testimony had been central to the case. Charges against Dale were withdrawn on September 9, 2010, due to insufficient evidence. A former Bar 1 prisoner later testified that Johnson's status within the prison hierarchy reached mythic proportions following the murder. The message was clear: no informant was safe, regardless of their criminal reputation or status. Matthew Johnson's murder trial began on September 13, 2011, at the Supreme Court of Victoria. As security officers led him into the courtroom, Johnson made a deliberate gesture to news cameras, forming his hands into the letters POW, confirming his prisoners of war gang affiliation even under the scrutiny of Australia's justice system. The prosecution's case appeared straightforward. Crown Prosecutor Mark Rochford presented the security footage showing Johnson's methodical attack on Williams. Forensic experts testified about the fatal injuries and the murder weapon's capacity to inflict maximum damage. Johnson's defense strategy proved unexpected. Rather than denying the killing, his attorney Bill Stewart argued Johnson had acted in self-preservation. Stewart told the court Johnson believed Williams planned to murder him using a sock filled with pool balls, though no such weapon was ever found. The trial revealed Johnson's contempt for informants. Prison letters seized from his cell contained explicit statements: "Dogs deserve to die," and "no mercy for those who talk to cops." When questioned about Williams' cooperation with authorities, Johnson remained stone-faced, refusing to directly address the topic. On September 22, 2011, after deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Johnson showed no reaction as Justice Lex Lasry announced he had been convicted of murder. At the sentencing hearing on December 8, 2011, Justice Lasry condemned Johnson's actions. This was a vicious, calculated murder committed in circumstances where the victim had no chance whatsoever. Johnson received life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 32 years, one of the harshest sentences in Victoria's recent history. After his conviction, Johnson was initially held in Bar 1 Prison's Melaleuca High Security Unit, which houses the most dangerous prisoners in Victoria. This unit features enhanced security protocols, limited interaction with other inmates, and constant surveillance. While not technically solitary confinement in the strictest sense, prisoners in Melaleuca experience highly restricted movement and social contact. Australian corrections policy generally avoids indefinite solitary confinement as defined internationally, 22+ hours alone daily with minimal human contact. However, high-risk prisoners like Johnson typically face what's called separation or segregation, confined to their cells for up to 23 hours daily with strictly controlled and limited interactions with selected other inmates during the remaining hour. Johnson's security classification ensures he remains under the highest level of supervision. His communications, visitors, and activities are heavily monitored and restricted. If you found these stories as compelling and disturbing as I did, please take a moment to subscribe to Murder and Mystery HQ and join our community of mystery seekers. Hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss a case. Stay safe and stay curious.